Bolivia's Chamber of Deputies is debating a bill that would establish a deadline for the holding of general elections after its approval in the upper house. Spanish health authorities have reported the highest number of new COVID-19 cases since the country's lockdown ended. Palestinian authorities have rejected a deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates to normalise relations. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. We begin in Bolivia, where the Chamber of Deputies is debating a bill that would establish a deadline for the holding of general elections after its approval in the upper house. Meanwhile, social and trade union organisations maintain roadblocks across the country on the 11th day of a general strike. The bill sets October 18th as the deadline for the holding of the general elections and establishes sanctions against anyone who violates or attempts to change this deadline. The bill was proposed by legislators of the Movement Towards Socialism Party and seeks to prevent yet another postponement of the general elections, which were moved for the fourth time by the Electoral Tribunal from September to October 18th, sparking widespread protests. The Bolivian Workers' Centre, the chief trade union federation of the country, together with the social movements of the Unity Pact Alliance, are now calling for the vote to be held a week earlier on October 11th, but have made clear that they are open to negotiations. Brazil surpassed a figure of 104,000 COVID-19 deaths this Wednesday. However, it reported the lowest daily increase in the last 40 days. According to the Health Ministry, over 200 deaths and 10,000 cases were reported in the last 24 hours. Brazil has now reported both the second highest number of cases at almost 3.2 million and the second highest death toll in the world, only surpassed by the United States. Colombia's National Health Institute reported more than 12,000 new COVID-19 cases on Tuesday, while warning of a sharp increase in the number of infections. Health authorities also registered 362 new deaths and urged the Colombian population to follow the lockdown and biosecurity measures. To date, the Latin American country has reported more than 422,000 coronavirus cases and nearly 14,000 deaths, making it the third hardest hit nation in South America and the 8th in the world. Argentina and Mexico have announced that they will jointly produce a COVID-19 vaccine developed by the UK-based multinational laboratory AstraZeneca and Oxford University. The vaccine will be made available to the entire region with the sole exception of Brazil. Millions of doses at affordable prices will be distributed to all Latin American and Caribbean countries that request the drug in the first quarter of 2021. The alliance between a pharmaceutical company, business groups and the progressive Argentinian and Mexican governments join the efforts of Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Russia, China and Iran to fight this global enemy together. And Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador commented on the move to save lives across the region.
This is truly something exceptional that will help us a great deal to maintain hope, to put an end to uncertainty, to have the possibility of a better, healthy life on the horizon.
Cuban health authorities presented an update on the COVID-19 figures this Thursday.
With the analysis of these 4,591 samples, 46 people tested positive for COVID-19. 46 people in which SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 were detected. And with this behavior of testing and results, 314,499 tests have been carried out, and 3,174 people have been diagnosed with COVID-19.
And the National Director of Epidemiology at the Cuban Ministry of Public Health made reference to the number of people who have recovered from COVID-19.
Yesterday there were 21 discharges, all from Havana. It is a good number, but unfortunately when we compare it with the number of cases diagnosed yesterday, it is still a negative figure. And with these 21 discharges yesterday, 2,525 patients have recovered. This represents 80% of all the cases diagnosed in our country.
Lastly, Dr. Duran confirmed the death of one person from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours.
Unfortunately, one patient has died yesterday from the disease. To date, Cuba reports 89 deaths. The country's mortality rate is 2.8%.
On Thursday, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced the suspension of private charter flights between the United States and Cuba starting in October. According to a statement, the decision will affect all charter flights under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Department of Transportation, except for authorized public charter flights to and from Havana and authorized private charter flights for emergency medical purposes, search and rescue activities, and other travel deemed in the interests of the United States. Meanwhile, family visits to Cuba have been heavily impacted under the Trump administration, which banned commercial flights to all Cuban airports except Havana late last year, before imposing the same restrictions on charter flights from the US in January. The latest measure aims at tightening the sanctions imposed by the United States against the Cuban people. And we'll be right back after this short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Spanish health authorities reported over 2,900 new COVID-19 cases on Thursday, representing the highest number since the country's lockdown ended, while noting that the Madrid region is the hardest hit area.
In Spain, the number of reported cases continues to rise, both by date of diagnosis and by date of onset of symptoms. But it's true that it's a gentle rise that allows the implementation of control measures in a much more serious and much more controlled way. Madrid is one of those with the more dangerous situation. I think there are calls for attention. We have to act, and they are acting a lot and very well, but the entire population and all the health systems and all of us who work in the health system have to maintain tension.
Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin has stated that progress is being made in Brexit trade talks after meeting with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson for the first time since taking office in June. As the talks are ongoing to try and reach a deal between London and Brussels, neighbouring Ireland, which is a member of the European Union, has expressed concern regarding the impact on border issues with Northern Ireland. The Brexit talks are set to continue until October, but fears are growing that a deal will not be reached before the deadline on December 31st.
That there is a landing zone, if that will is there on both sides. Say that I think where there's a will, there's a way. It seems to me that there is a landing zone, if that will is there on both sides, and I think it is, on the European Union side and on the British side, to find that landing zone. We both agreed on the absolute necessity for a free trade agreement that would be tariff-free, quota-free, that's the best possible outcome for the European Union, for the United Kingdom.
Australia's virus-hit Victoria state reported a major drop in new coronavirus cases on Thursday, but officials have warned against negligence amid a worrying spread of the virus in regional areas outside Melbourne. Only 278 new cases and 8 deaths were detected in Victoria, the lowest number in weeks, while a smaller outbreak in neighbouring New South Wales produced 12 additional cases and 1 death. The surge in Melbourne, the capital of Victoria, had pushed daily infection rates over 700 in recent weeks. Dozens have died during a second wave that struck after Australia appeared to have controlled the epidemic. There are now signs that strict measures, including an overnight curfew and the shutdown of non-essential businesses, are bringing the new outbreak under control. To date, almost 21 million COVID-19 cases and over 750,000 deaths have been confirmed worldwide. Latin America is currently the hardest hit region by the pandemic, with over 5.8 million cases and 228,000 fatalities. However, Europe is experiencing a surge of new outbreaks in different areas. China has demanded that the United States put a halt to discriminatory measures against Chinese companies, with the aim of clearing a path towards implementing a Phase 1 trade deal between the two countries.
The coronavirus pandemic and the restrictive measures the U.S. imposed on Chinese exports undoubtedly affected the purchase of certain goods and services. Under the current circumstances, it is necessary for both parties to work together and overcome the difficulties. We hope the U.S. stops the restrictive measures and discriminatory actions towards Chinese companies and create conditions to implement the Phase 1 trade deal.
Heavy rains have caused serious floods in southwest China's Yunnan province. The rains pounded Shaotong city through Wednesday night to early Thursday morning, causing serious floods in many low-lying streets and some homes. The water levels in the urban area of Shaoyang district exceeded 40 centimetres. The flooding created traffic jams and police had to stand in the water to direct vehicles during rush hour. Local authorities are working to drain the water and distributing sandbags to prevent the water from entering homes. Local firefighters have evacuated people who are trapped to safe places. The 17th Shanghai Book Fair opened with strict biosecurity measures to ensure readers' safety. At the entrance of the fair, visitors were allowed to enter the facility in groups of 10. People are required to show their health code and have temperatures taken after registering. Other precautions include wearing masks, going through thermal cameras and staggered visiting hours. To provide a safer, more spacious and comfortable environment for visitors, organisers have expanded the fair area by more than 10% this year. Indonesia's Mount Sinabung volcano erupted again on Thursday with a string of blasts that sent plumes of ash 2 kilometres into the sky, triggering a flight warning and fears of lava flows. The activity marked at least the 8th time that the rumbling volcano on Sumatra Island has erupted in less than a week, although there were no injuries or major damage reported. Authorities issued a warning to planes flying near the volcano, which last saw a deadly eruption in 2016. In late 2018, a volcano in the strait between Java and Sumatra Islands erupted, causing an underwater landslide and tsunami that killed more than 400 people. And we have more news coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Israel and the United Arab Emirates announced they had reached an agreement on Thursday to normalise relations. The deal was brokered by the United States, with President Donald Trump taking the credit for facilitating what he called a historic peace agreement, which would see the United Arab Emirates become the third Arab state to have full diplomatic ties with Israel after Egypt and Jordan. A joint statement by the UAE, Israel and the US said the breakthrough would advance peace in the Middle East region. As part of the agreement, Israel agreed to suspend the annexation of parts of the occupied West Bank, at least for now. And the Palestinian National Authority has rejected the agreement, highlighting the move undermines the Arab Peace Initiative and decisions over the Palestinian cause.
The Palestinian leadership announces its strong rejection and condemnation of the surprise American-Israeli Emirati tripartite declaration on a full normalization of relations between the occupying Israeli states and the United Arab Emirates, in exchange of an alleged temporary suspension of the plan to annex Palestinian lands and extend Israel's sovereignty over them. The Palestinian leadership sees this step as torpedoing the Arab Peace Initiative, the decisions of the Arab and Islamic summits, and international law, as well as an aggression against the Palestinian people and a neglect of the Palestinian rights and sanctities, first and foremost Jerusalem and the independent Palestinian state according to the borders of June 4, 1967.
And residents in the Gaza Strip, together with representatives of the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas, have also denounced the agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, noting it undermines the legitimate struggle of the Palestinian people to end the Israeli occupation.
Agreement does not serve the Palestinian cause at all. It serves the Zionist ideas. This agreement encourages the occupation to continue in denying the rights of all Palestinian people. Rather, it is the continuation of crimes and aggression against all Palestinian people. What was required was always to support the legitimate Palestinian struggle against the occupation, not to establish relations with it. As Palestinians, we cannot confront the annexation plan with comprehensive resistance supported by the Arab and international communities, not through normalization agreements with the occupation. We condemn the process of normalization with Israel. We all hope that the United Arab Emirates will offer support and aid to the Palestinian cause, not normalization. This is something that doesn't serve the Palestinian cause and is against the interests of the Palestinian people. Normalization does not serve the Arab nation and does not serve any Arab countries. This normalization could open the way for other Arab countries to follow the example of the Arab Emirates. There are Arab peace initiatives. The United Arab Emirates does not respect them, does not respect the agreements, and does not respect the feelings of the Palestinian people.
On Thursday, the caretaker government of Lebanon announced the extension of the state of emergency that was decreed after the explosions in the port of Beirut. The state of emergency will last until August 21st. According to Lebanese law, a state of emergency can only be declared once by the government and for a period of 8 days. It is then up to the Legislative Assembly to decide whether or not to extend it through a vote. The measure means the Lebanese army will have exceptional powers over civil matters and will be responsible for national security during this period. And the reconstruction process is moving forward in Beirut following the devastating explosions of August 4th. So far, more than 170 deaths have been confirmed. Meanwhile, Iran and Russia have provided aid to the Lebanese people. The European Union has also raised €250 million, but it's estimated that more than 30 billion will be needed. The United States, on the other hand, remains firm in its decision not to lift sanctions against Lebanon. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said he would speak to German Chancellor Angela Merkel and EU Chief Charles Michel on Thursday to defuse the tensions between Greece and Turkey over energy exploration in the eastern Mediterranean. The long-standing tensions between Turkey and EU member state Greece escalated when Ankara assumed energy exploration in the region of the Greek island of Castellariso on Monday. Turkey dispatched a research ship accompanied by naval vessels, prompting Greece to send its own ships to the area to monitor Turkey's work. President Erdogan said in a meeting of his ruling party's provincial leaders that he wanted to resolve the emerging crisis through dialogue and negotiations, accusing Athens of harbouring ill will.
Today, once more, I will have a conversation with Ms. Merkel, and I will have the same conversation with Mr. Michel. We need dialogue and negotiations to find a solution for the Eastern Mediterranean. If we act sensibly, a win-win formula protecting everyone's right can be found.
And the French government announced that it will strengthen its military presence in the Mediterranean in response to the growing maritime dispute between Turkey and Greece. In a statement, the government said the measure was intended to improve the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean region and to show the country's willingness to ensure respect for international law. The action will be coordinated with European partners. President Emmanuel Macron described the Turkish moves to explore for oil as unilateral decisions and called for an end to tensions in favour of diplomacy between the neighbouring countries and NATO allies. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization is fighting the ongoing desert locust infestations in East Africa, which pose a threat to people's livelihoods and food security. Significant progress has been made in a number of countries, especially in Kenya, where just a few of the 29 counties that were infested in February this year still have locusts today. According to the FAO, the threat of possible reinfestation towards the end of the year calls for careful and continued surveillance. From the beginning of January up until early August, the infestation of over 600,000 hectares across the East Africa region has been brought under control, with estimates that over 500 billion locusts have been killed in the entire region.
We wanted to control them as fast as possible before they reach in stage 5 and young adults, who will start again maybe copulating and laying more eggs. So we need to control it very fast.
We continue to monitor because locusts can go into places that cannot be easily reached and then emerge from there. So we will continue to strengthen our surveillance capacity, our control efforts, and our livelihood recovery efforts. So it's a process. So we can't specify a specific date that by this date they will go, but we can simply say by this date we have contained to a large extent what could have been a disaster.
Opposition figures in Mali continue to demand that President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta step down, claiming this is the only situation to the ongoing political crisis.
Today, there is unspeakable repression followed by hasty judgments that we cannot accept. Today, there are political detainees from our ranks, and we do not intend to enter into any discussion until they are released outright. No provisional release, but a definite release. There have been killings in this country, 23 deaths, and today there is no indication of the perpetrators, sponsors and accomplices. This is unacceptable. In the absence of legal sanctions, today administratively we should have been told who is responsible, who gave the order and who is in accomplice. As long as this is not done, we will not be able to enter into any kind of discussion. We have indicated that we are not refusing to meet with Mr. Keita, but that we will meet with him to discuss only the conditions of his departure.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.